Should we figure this out a long time ago?
Yeah, we just
Then and all, I
just get Bluebeam and just cut it. It's it's amazing how they get. All of a sudden, oh, I got this. No, we're not doing that. Figure it out. It's actually more than just. It's more than just. It's actually had a toilet.
They had drinking fountains. Oh, and get this.
That's the real reason. That's the real reason.
Some outdoors. He wanted to put in
Shut up, I didn't do my first.
Order. Welcome everyone to the joint public meeting, April 14th, 2023. This meeting is called to order. It's a joint meeting between the Planning Board and the Board of Commissioners to conduct a public hearing. First, we will need the approval of the agenda.
Make a motion to approve the agenda.
We have a motion.
Second.
We have a second. Commissioner Miles, thank you. All in favor? Motion passed. Commissioner Laux will not be with us tonight, but he is with us online. We have 5 public hearings, 1 conditional zoning, 4 text amendments. ACZ 2023-03 is the first public hearing, which is a request for conditional zoning for 3.51 acres parcel at 1106 North Arundel Avenue from HQ heavy commercial to HC heavy commercial to HC-C heavy commercial conditional district. I declare the public hearing open and ask for staff presentation. Thank you, Adam.
Board and Planning Board. Walking through the conditional rezoning, as the mayor mentioned, for conditional rezoning 2023-03 for the property at 1106 North Arundel Avenue. As the commissioners have come to see, I like to go through the standards and walking through what we're looking at as far as the standards of the ordinance. In talking about conditional rezonings, we are first making sure that the conditional rezoning, it advances the public health, safety, and welfare of the community. And while things like parks, schools, and hospitals are do advance a lot of the community, you have to consider that there are things that might not hurt community. You're looking to make sure that it doesn't make anything worse, and you're just making sure that any specific conditions mitigate the impact of the proposed use. You're also looking for that the proposed conditional rezoning is appropriate for its proposed location and is consistent with the purpose, the goals, objectives, and policies of the town's adopted policy guidelines. That's making sure that the conditional rezoning is consistent with the surrounding uses. As an extreme example, you can look at tire manufacturing facilities might not be good beside schools. You can also, in dealing with that one, you're talking about making sure it matches the land use plan, the transportation plan, as well as the parks plan. Conditional rezonings also have to be reasonable and in the public interest. Example of this is a convenience store that is easily accessible from the highway, which prevents increased traffic flow onto interior roads within the town. You have to make sure that conditional rezoning's concept plans are consistent with the ordinance and that they consistent with the ordinance and regulations within the town, and making sure that the plan meets the standard regulations, the development standards, landscaping standards, things along those lines. And then the last one is any relevant factors. That's anything that the Board of Commissioners deem to be relevant dealing with the case. So now diving into the rezoning itself. This is a conditional rezoning. As the mayor said, this is from heavy commercial to heavy commercial conditional specifically for a convenience store with gasoline sales. The property itself is the applicant is H4C Store Holdings LLC, or the 3 LLC. This is at the corner of Dogwood Drive and North Arundel Avenue. The property is 3.51 acres, and again, the current zoning is heavy commercial HC, and they're looking to go to heavy commercial conditional with that specific use standard and the site plan attached. The public hearing notice, just to go over these things, all properties that are going through for public hearing, make sure we, by state standards, we have signs posted on the property along any frontage that it has. So this one had signs along 2 portions of the property, along Dogwood and Arundel, so you may have seen those. Public hearing notices are mailed out to property owners within 750 feet. As you may know, that number has increased recently thanks to the board's actions. And then the rezoning goes to the paper of general circulation. The notice is given to them and circulated twice, actually in the Wake Weekly. It is posted to the town website. And then there's also an email notification list that is provided that anyone who wants to within the general public is more than welcome to sign up. Board members, if you want to have your email on there, just to make sure you see any goings on as far as public hearings, that is available on the town website on the planning department page. Looking again at the piece of property, you can see there highlighted at Dogwood and Arundel. The property itself, as I've said, is heavy commercial zone. You can see quite a bit of the properties around there are in the same color, the HC heavy commercial. You can see the O&I from the library to the northeast. And then the green that you see surrounding it is area that is currently zoned residential. But in bringing up our next slide, it's important to point out those areas that are listed as currently residential are generally undeveloped, and our future land use plan has those properties as either general commercial or suburban commercial. To walk through the timeline of activity with this submittal, I just want to kind of go through. The plan was originally submitted on 3/1/23, so this first submittal. Just after a month of submittal, the comment letter by staff was sent out. The TRC then had a meeting on the 12th of April, TRC being obviously staff and extended parties outside, whether that be City of Raleigh Public Utility or
Could you please
engineer.
explain what TRC stands for
Yeah,
for
sorry.
the public?
TRC is the Technical Review Committee, and that is made up of staff from all departments, as well as outside sources like the City of Raleigh Public Utility Department, the Sedimentation and Erosion Control with Wake County, DOT if needed, things like that. They get sent out to a few people that are involved in that. Following the TRC meeting, the applicant resubmitted on 5/13, and then comments were sent out just about a month after that. You'll see that the final submittal addressing all the comments was submitted on 7/17. I want to point out that in a lot of situations, we have applicants who will go through numerous reviews, and in some situations, it could be 5 to 7 reviews, and it might take multiple years for them to address comments. This is a situation where the applicant listened to staff, listened to TRC, addressed the comments after the first TRC meeting, and moved forward very quickly with only 2 submittals. And then that's just a note that we received some comments from NCDOT, which triggered the revise of a couple conditions following their final submittal. Talking through the concept plan for this site a little bit, it is, as I've said, a convenience store with gasoline sales. One of the things that you'll notice is they actually have a separate truck fueling area that's over here. It has its own exit or own entrance as well as exit. There is a connection between both areas of the standard vehicle fueling areas and the truck fueling area, primarily for emergency services and anything like that, to make sure that there's a secondary exit for this portion of the site. The proposed elevations are listed here. You can see, make sure to match up A to A, B to B, C to C, and D to D as you're looking at it. This is the A is what would be considered the front for people to be coming into the building. That is where the primary entrance for the building would be, and that is right here where it is adjacent to the vehicular small passenger vehicle fueling area. You'll see that this side B that does not have any type of window glazing or fenestration, and I will talk more about that as we get to it, is right here. But there is substantial area between there, and we'll kind of go into some more of their conditions talking about that. We'll talk more about these elevations. So, generally speaking, they are looking at a couple conditions on this site. They're looking to have the fuel pumps between the building and the street. Those fuel pumps in question are the pumps that are between the building and the Jones Street extension. So that is, to walk back here really quick, that is these being here. That is a standard of the ordinance that fueling has, or the pumps have to be behind the front line of the building. This is what they're hoping to achieve as a condition of the rezoning, is being allowed to have those fuel pumps there. They have some facade requirement conditions, which I'll get into in the next couple slides, as well as some construction and road and traffic improvements that they'll be including. Talking about the facade requirements, you first can look at the south wall. That is the wall that we were talking about that faces the standard, vehicular fuel pumps. They were only able to achieve a 29% transparency, and transparency and glazing is the glass that you see along that side. And the minimum requirement is actually 30%, so they're requesting that to deviate to 29% rather than 30%. The western wall that you see here, although they achieved 33% glazing, which is above the 30% required, they are using spandrel glass, which is that black mirror-like glass that you see in a lot of situations that is to appear like windows, but is not actually a window. The interior layout of the building has, I believe, there are coolers and things like that in this area, just leading to not being able to keep that area transparent. And then the east wall, which is the one I pointed out, has no glazing, you'll see here. So they are requesting a condition for those facade deviations. Regarding road improvements, the applicant has proposed a number of different road improvements that are in line with their TIA as well as DOT concerns that were brought up during the review. The first being, and they will be including an eastbound right turn lane on Dogwood. That is a right turn lane that is going into the site, so it's a decel lane for anyone who's familiar with that. So coming in on Dogwood, being able to turn in and not impede the flow of traffic to the library. They will also be including a westbound left turn lane on Dogwood that is coming out of the site, and it is a left off there onto a Rendell. That's a dedicated left turn lane, so it's actually the addition of a second lane on that portion of the property, or of the right-of-way. They are also including the condition to add a second lane, a dedicated left turn lane on the US 64 off-ramp. So that would be, as you're coming off the ramp, they would have a dedicated left, come here, and the right-hand lane would be a straight and right lane. As well as with all of those improvements, they will be retiming and signal upgrades dealing with those issues. As far as the utility allocation policy, obviously we just recently upgraded and improved the utility allocation policy. Kind of want to walk through what they have. As board, we promised that we would be doing on anything coming through. The base point classification of 40 points was changed recently. I believe it was 20 at a prior time. And what they are including as part of their utility allocation policy is they are actually constructing something that is not required by the TIA or the CTP or the UDO, which is the full construction of the Jones Street right-of-way, which is both sides of it. When I say full construction, they are, by the CTP standard, only required to construct the center line back. They're doing a full road construction. They're doing this to help achieve the truck vehicle, or the trucks coming through and being able to make their way back to Arundel. The second one that they're doing that's giving them 5 points, like the other one, is this type of stormwater measure that they're doing is actually a wetland type. I cannot speak on the specifics of how that's achieved. They might have one of their engineers here that can address a little bit of that, but it is a wetland-style stormwater control measure. The last one, they got 10 points because they have a total of 10 native shade trees that they will be including, and that is above and beyond the landscaping that is required, which you can see there's quite a lot of landscaping required on the site. These 10 trees that you're seeing are additional. So again, walking through the standards really quick that we're looking through. We're talking about something that is a conditional rezoning and that it advances the public health, safety, and welfare of the town, that it is appropriate for the location and is consistent with the proposed goals, objectives, and policies of the town, that the conditional rezoning is reasonable and in the public interest, that the concept plan is consistent with the regulations, and any other factors that you guys deem to matter. Staff recommends taking, public comment and referring the matter to the planning board. If you have any questions for me, I'll be happy to answer them. The applicant is here if you have some specific questions that they'll be able to answer as well.
Questions from the board. Commissioner Baxter?
First, if we go back to slide 15. I'd like to have an understanding of why the glazing is solely at 29 and not the 30% required.
Question for them. I could not tell you why they couldn't achieve that one additional percent. But we can get to that when they come up if you'd like to hold on to that question.
Okay. What is the total percentage then of the transparency and the glazing when the spandrel is used? It says 33%, but is that 33% transparency?
No, sorry, that was not clear. That was an excerpt from the condition, but it is 33% of that wall is glazing, is glass. But they are using spandrel for all but, I believe, the door on that. So I don't share the total percentage specifically of the spandrel versus the glass on the door.
And so that means that it's not going to be transparent because...
Correct. There is some transparency with the door, but that is the section that is, they're not meeting that transparency requirement.
And I'm assuming since this went through TRC, this was acceptable for both the police and fire departments?
Correct. They were involved in both reviews and had no issue with the site. They actually, police and fire were involved in making sure that there was the extra connection between the standard vehicles and the truck fueling area to allow pass-throughs.
All right, and then on the next slide, slide 16. Okay, so on my paperwork, it
Yeah,
says...
there was a issue there from a carryover from another slide. I apologize. That was printed and before I
Okay, so
caught it.
that is extra verbiage that shouldn't be there.
That is correct. I apologize.
Okay. All right. And then with the additional, I guess we're on 17, the additional tree coverage, is there any indication of what the visibility of the site is going to be from the library property?
They will give me a little bit more of what you're asking about that.
If you look out
Yeah.
of the library,
Yeah.
are you going to see a big honkin' fueling station, or is it going to be, are the trees and the coverage going to be such that it's not a garish monstrosity?
I think, I couldn't tell you what the vertical fueling station looks like, what the side of that looks like. They have not gone through the construction plan review to deal with those details. I know that the street trees, obviously, at first planning, are not going to be big enough to cover that. You know, it takes a few years before the trees actually get established big enough to block it. So you will likely be able to see it at planning, but hopefully as the trees mature, it will serve its purpose and establish a good buffer between the two.
So what type of buffer is it then initially that's going to be provided?
The buffer there, off the top of my head, I do not know what that is. It is a type C buffer that is along the Jones Street right-of-way. That's actually all the right-of-ways is a type C buffer, as well as between the back of curb and the sidewalk.
That are, say that one more time.
The street trees. So there's a buffer, and then there are additional trees that are required between the back of curb and sidewalk. So you'll have that additional layer of trees that you see there kind of moving along.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you so much.
Commissioner Miles,
None at this time.
Commissioner Clark,
None at this time.
Commissioner Harrison.
Yes, so I have a question, and I mentioned this to Mr. Clark when we were looking at this in our meeting the other day. I know that police and fire were involved as it relates to the safety of this, but I still have concerns about this particular business and the one that's slated to come across the street because of the time, the hours of operation that both of these businesses will be in. And there's the pedestrian crossing for this business is at the light, the top.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of traffic coming from a lot of different directions here. And with two businesses that are late night businesses, possibly open 24 hours, I have some concerns that there are no other crossings other than at the lights in these areas. So I just want to make mention that maybe that's something we can go back and look at.
Yeah, absolutely.
To maybe possibly add some type of pedestrian crossing just for the safety of the people who may be going back and forth to these two businesses.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll take ours. I'll talk with Mr. Clark, and I'll make sure we talk with Public Works as well to see what we can do and can't do as far as striping to improve those areas.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Questions, comments from the board, from the commissioners?
Last question. Did Public Works sit in the TRC, or were they part of
Public Works is part of TRC, yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, commissioners. Now we will have questions or comments from the planning board, starting with Ms. Alexander.
I'm having a little bit of trouble understanding this right turn that you're talking
Yeah.
about that should not interfere with the library. Because I know I go down this road all the time, and it seems like at the light there, you turn right, and you're going right into the library.
Yeah.
And you're saying that you said something about that should not
So-
impact the library, and I'm not sure how that works.
If you look up on the screen here, so the D-cell lane right here is the lane that I was referring to. That's a right turn lane that guides into the property. It allows for the free flow of traffic that's moving straight.
Okay.
That is what I was referring to.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mr. Newkirk? Mr. Germano?
I have a question that might be something that the applicant can answer, so I'll just ask it now and you let me know.
Okay.
At the exit off of Jones Street,
Yes.
that seems like a pinch point, and it concerns me that we already have semis taking out power and light poles at the intersection of Gannon and Arundel. It looks like that could be in a very similar situation where it's a blind spot and there's a big truck turning. I would be curious to see what the path simulation shows as that.
They have done that, and it was able to handle the largest trucks that would be coming
Okay.
to that site.
Okay.
But
Very good. That's all for now.
Mr. Lowry?
Nothing at this time.
Ms. Johnson?
Yes, I'm concerned about the traffic. I know we spoke about the library, but no one mentioned the Eastern Regional Center, because there are people that walk a lot of times to get to the Eastern Regional Center. And is there going to be like a stop sign or slow up sign or something? I doubt if it would be a traffic light.
I'll have to double check on the TIA. It was, some of the TIA improvements were not included on this site plan. They'll be addressed with the construction plans as they come through, just because the roadway improvements slightly shifted from this design after the TIA occurred. And I'll have to double check if there's a stop bar that's getting added here to slow down traffic, make sure people have a chance to stop and pedestrians to be able to cross. I'll have to double check though.
Okay. All right. That's it.
Mr. Schilling?
I, like Mr. Germano, have concerns about the pinch point there off of Jones and Dogwood. Because trucks, you know, they make wide right turns and they make wide left turns, and I'm just concerned about somebody coming in, heading to the library or the county offices. You got somebody coming in that's wanting to go straight through, and you got a truck swinging wide. It just seems like,
While the applicant's talking, I'll see if I can pull up the turning radius design that they did, so we can talk about that really quick.
like I said, I'm not necessarily doubting that it can be done. I'm just wondering if it's wise for it to be done.
Absolutely, I understand.
My other concern, and in past life, I managed gas stations and convenience stores, and I'm always concerned about the traffic flow within the site itself. Sheets being a good example, because I live right there. You know, people are kind of coming and going every which way, and it causes a lot of issues. And so I see there's one entrance
Right here.
right there, and it's both the entrance and the exit. So you would think the natural flow would be people would turn right into the site and then continue to the right and circle around and then come out. But I can tell you that somebody's going to want to go straight ahead and make a quick right turn into a parking spot, and you're going to have people coming out. And I'm just wondering again about, from a safety point of view, how that's going to work.
Yeah, that area right there that you were mentioning
Yeah.
is set and wide enough for 2 lanes of traffic for both directions. But if, you know, the applicant has the ability to modify the conditions, if that's something that you feel needs to be addressed when we move forward with the
Well,
public.
you know, I don't know if it's possible or not. I mean, if there's some way to actually direct the flow of traffic. What happens now,
Yeah.
again, like at Sheets, just not picking on Sheets, but just to use them as an example, because they're right there. There's nothing that tells people they have to go a certain way. So some people come in and they want to face the pumps this way, some want to face the pumps this way, some want to go to the store and park, some want to back in, some want to back out, and you have kind of a free-for-all going on. If there was at least some signage or lane designations or some way to, you know, guide the flow of traffic to make it as safe as possible. I'm just concerned about that.
Applicant taking notes, so hopefully they'll be able to address that.
My second and totally unrelated point is this just fueling for trucks? There's no showers and stuff like
It is
that?
just fueling for trucks as far as I understand. I'm getting nods. That's yes, just
Okay.
fueling.
Is there the potential for semi-tractor trailers, 18-wheelers to be parking somewhere to be able to run into the convenience store to get something to eat?
No.
But I mean,
Parking
are they
during
not going to try
fueling.
to do that?
Parking during fueling, but you guys do not intend, and you can address this when you come up, from my understanding of having a parking that they could stay there and sleep or anything like that. Yeah, this is just for stopping while they're fueling and moving along.
What would prevent them from doing that?
I think that would be the management of the site, keeping people moving.
A related question to that would be, you know, you go down highways, interstates, wherever, there's constantly trucks lined up on the off-ramp because they have to take specified breaks. And I just wonder if we will be inviting that, because once they get their break done, now they can go to the fueling station. Are we gonna have a lot of trucks parked up and down the?
That is something that I've thought about, and I plan on reaching out to NCDOT, because I had a feeling that kind of question would come up, and seeing if there was something, because it's, it's not at every stop. It's some of them you see them every day, and others you don't. I didn't know if there was something that DOT has as far as restrictions for parking or no parking signs or anything like that that could be addressed, and I'd be happy to look into that and kind of see how we can move that forward.
And then the last one I can think of right now is, again, going to a safety concern. Usually when you see these kind of areas where there's fueling for trucks, they're sort of out in the middle of nowhere. There's not a school and a park and a county office and a library and a convenience. There's usually fast food, but there's usually not all this other stuff within close proximity. And what if there was a tractor trailer like over the height limit and took down the canopy, or a pump exploded or something like that? I know that's a very worst case scenario. I get it.
I can just speak on my knowledge a little bit, that it is, there's heavy standards for safety for all that stuff that they have to follow with fire code, building code, everything like that. I'm sure the roof that will be there is going to be substantially higher than any vehicle that they would ever have moving through there to hope, prevent that from occurring.
And then last but not least, and basically all my questions are related to the safety of the whole thing. I would just wonder about the danger of a lot of pedestrian traffic starting to make its way over to the park and the school and the library.
Could you
'Cause it's right there.
clarify?
Yeah.
Could you clarify what your comment or question was a little bit, Mr. Schilling?
Yeah, I know that because I live relatively close to this site and I have walked quite a bit back in that area, there's a nice little trail that goes from the library back
Correct.
over and up to the park.
Correct.
And I'm just, but there's kids out there playing during hours in the park and in the school. And I just would be concerned about, with increased number of people in and out of that area, some of them on foot, how much spillover there would be, into areas like public parks and whatnot.
So is your concern like increased risk or exposure to human trafficking concerns?
Yeah,
Okay.
one,
I just
certainly.
wanted to make sure that I
Yeah.
was understanding you correctly.
Human trafficking concerns, drug sales, all manners of stuff.
Thank you.
And also, there's the parking lot, right there, that if the trucks wanted to come and park there, what would stop them from doing
Are you
that?
referring to the,
Eastern Regional Center?
yeah, the parking lot at the Eastern Regional Center and
Right,
Library?
yes.
That would be, it's private property, that would be Wake County having to police, making sure that people don't park there. And then obviously I think there is some issues if they don't move, it would be a trespassing issue, and then our police department would likely be involved.
One other question, like in that same vein, and this is just ignorance on my part, would RVs and motorhomes utilize those truck fueling pumps?
I would relay that to them if it was open to them, so.
And if so, again, where are they gonna park? Because they're gonna, bound to wanna go into the convenience store and get a drink or use the restroom. And I'm just, again, afraid of this big mess of large vehicles all trying to get in and out and park, and pedestrian traffic and vehicular traffic. It just seems like we're inviting
Understand.
some issues.
Thank you. Ms. Jenkins?
No questions.
Mr. Lowry?
So it was mentioned about the height of the canopy. What is the height of that truck canopy versus the building?
Do not know. They haven't included that as part of the conditions because they weren't looking for any sort of deviation. We can look really quick at what the maximum height might be. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head.
'Cause I would be concerned if it would be taller than the actual convenience store itself. So now, if I'm on a rental, I'm looking over at this convenience store with this black glass, spandrel glass or whatever, and then there's this big canopy behind it.
They may be able to address what they're looking at, and I can take a look at what the maximum allowance would be while we're going through.
Do they anticipate or know the number of tanks that they're refilling tanks that
They'd
they're
be
going to
able
have?
to answer that. I do not
Okay.
know. No. It is on there. Okay.
Have we discussed the tank storage on site?
That would be something that they would be able to address.
Okay. And then, while I appreciate that they met the minimum requirements for the utility allocation policy, I'm just curious why they didn't possibly go with an additional 5 points and put in maybe the vehicle charging, because, you know, it's a gas station, we're charging, we're getting stuff.
Yeah.
It just makes sense to kind of add that little bit of an additional thing to enhance our town instead of kind of, you know, doing the bare minimum.
I understand. Yep.
So it's more of a comment, really.
Okay.
And then the only other comment I really have is that, you know, if we approve this, this is now going to be a gray site. So forever moving forward, there's fuel storage in the ground, and that can potentially lead to fuel in the ground, affecting water tables and things like that. And it would take special efforts to turn that into something else if they were to abandon this convenience store gas station at a future date.
And just to clarify, I believe they might be able to touch on what kind of mitigation methods and things like that. The details of that is not something that is in my wheelhouse, unfortunately.
Mr. Germano?
Going back to the pinch point, like Dominic was saying, with that tight radius on the backside, people coming in and out of the library and the regional center, are there plans to put any kind of stop sign or something like that because it looks like there could be sight triangle issues, a semi coming out of there. If it's coming out, it's already coming out. It's not gonna be able to stop, and someone comes, you know, speeding around the corner.
I believe the TIA had a stop sign on that.
Okay.
But it was part of just the transportation improvements that were
Yeah.
required. We can.
Okay,
but,
double
yeah.
check that. Okay, very good.
Any other questions
Yes.
from the planning board?
I'm sorry. Yeah, were you talking about an EV station when you're saying charging?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I wanna make
Electric
sure that-
vehicle charging station.
Because that is a definite, I think, a great question. My son's getting ready to go out and buy a Tesla. You know, there are a lot of people who are doing that these days, and it might be a really nice thing to have, a charging station there.
Ms. Shelley?
Question I had was, I know that the applicant is going to do the right-of-way and complete the road construction there, but at some point in time, all those small pieces of Jones are going to be connected, I would think, all the way over to Pierce's Road. And I just wonder, sooner or later, there's going to be a lot of vehicles entering and exiting off of Pierce's Road. And how is that going to be impacted?
Hopefully, as we have more, as there's more ways to get around town, it helps to improve some of the traffic on our main arteries. So having that type of connection actually helps for someone who's just doing a quick trip to a gas station or something like that, where they don't have to get onto the heavier flow of a rental. So hopefully, that will actually help to mitigate things in the future.
I did have one more question. The road improvements, the turn lanes and the retiming, the signaling, is there a requirement when this is to be done I mean, are they to do this at 10% of construction, or can they wait until 90% is done
this
and we
would be
already
a-
have traffic problems?
This would be occurring while they are constructing the site. They would be doing those
In
improvements.
conjunction with?
Correct, yeah.
So, but it's anticipated to be completed before the completion of the,
Timed out around the same timeline where it'd be finishing up, but they wouldn't be able to get a CO or certificate of occupancy
Okay.
for the building until those were addressed.
the timing and everything? Okay.
All that.
And one more question, sorry. On a Arundel, I'm just looking at the diagram. So is that an actual median right in the middle of Arundel there, or what is?
What you're seeing there is the street trees that are required by our
Over
landscape
to
use.
your left, yeah,
This.
right there, yeah.
Okay, no, that is just that Arundel in that section is actually built to the full build-out of the transportation plan, which is 4-lane median divided. Obviously, if there's a left turn lane, the left turn lane takes that instead of being a median. So that area is a lane itself, not a median.
Okay, well, I didn't see dotted lines in there, so I was like, okay, just wanted to make sure. Okay.
Any other questions, comments from the planning board? Now we take public comment.
Can I please ask my question, Mayor?
Yes, I thought you were going to wait till they did their
No,
presentation.
this is a separate question.
Okay,
I was actually going to ask Commissioner Harrison for some clarification about the crosswalks that you were talking about. Could you bring that back up, please, on the slides? So were you talking about the crosswalks on Dogwood, or were you talking about crosswalks at a different location?
I was talking about crosswalks in addition to the ones that are on Dogwood.
Okay, I just wanted to have an understanding of that. Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
we will now take public comment. Anyone wishes to speak in favor, come to the podium on the left. State your name, address.
My name is Tom Johnson. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Williams Mullen at 301 Fayetteville Street, Suite 1700 in Raleigh, here on behalf of the applicant. Got a lot of good questions. Between myself and our team, we can answer those questions. I'll go through those that I can, and then we can get further into it. I do want to speak to a little bit about why we are here. This is already zoned heavy commercial, and a convenience store is a permitted use under heavy commercial. So, but for the fact that this is surrounded by 3 streets and we could not get the canopies behind the building because it's surrounded by 3 streets, and we wanted the separate truck filling part, that is why we had to come forward with a conditional use zoning in order to address that. And as a result of going through that conditional use zoning, there were a lot of improvements that we agreed to do above and beyond what we would be required if it were a permitted use. So that was a good thing for Zebulon, and a good thing for the project. And as Adam said, staff's been great. We've worked through the process. We've tried to address those comments up front and as quickly as we could. We did have one amendment late in the process, but we went ahead and got together and got that resolved really quickly, and that was the turn lane coming off the westbound ramp off of Highway 64. DOT had wanted that left turn lane to be added. We added that as a condition, so we would have to do that. So that's why that came late in the process, but we went ahead and did that and reacted quickly, which we've done throughout the process. Again, many other questions. I can have Chris Taft, who's here with me, and Matt Louder, who's here as the project engineer. Chris Taft is with the applicant, to speak to glazing, but most of that glazing issue has to do, well, number one, surrounded by 3 streets again, and so you're having to meet some requirements that you might not ordinarily have to meet. But also it has to do with storage and things of that nature. Why is the spandrel glass on the back is because of those back-end activities that you don't want to be looking into a cooler or looking into something like that. Those are some things that you have to do, which is why that ended up being spandrel glass. I've done this many times before, say with restaurants that have to do that, and it's because of the certain things they have, such as kitchen and that sort of thing. So that's why that ends up happening. Some things, though, I did want to, let me see, wetlands, the wetland that we're doing, it's just a way to manage stormwater where you artificially plant a wetland for that water to infiltrate. And I can have the engineer speak more specifically to it, but you put plantings in there rather than being open water, so the stormwater will infiltrate through those plants. We did add some additional plantings at the request of the town on Arundel Street. We're pulling the sidewalk back off of Arundel and adding additional plantings on the street side of that sidewalk. So that sidewalk now wouldn't allow room to do that. We said we would pull it back and construct a new sidewalk and provide some additional plantings. And we've provided additional plantings throughout the site based upon the buffers, based upon what staff has requested. And we've met those requirements in going through that with staff so far as the plantings are occurred. Yes, when they're initially planted, they have to have room to grow, and it will take some time, but those plantings are there and will be there as part of the landscape plan and the buffer. We worked really hard with police and fire on this site to have good circulation. There were some changes we made in order to address that. One of the things about this site that's really, really good, and that's separating the truck portion from the vehicle portion. That really does help, and that's why we needed to come forward with the conditional use zoning to be able to do that. And so it keeps that traffic separate. But it's not only tractor trailers that have to come in there and get diesel, but it's pickup trucks that run on diesel. It is recreational vehicles that run on diesel. They will use those islands as well, and that, again, keeps that separation. That's a good thing. It makes traffic flow a lot better, and it's safer to do it that way. As far as the tanks for the station itself, there will be 4 underground storage tanks, but there's strict state requirements for those tanks now as far as detection, as far as construction and all of that, and this will meet all of those state requirements in terms of underground storage tanks. We did work very carefully with staff in looking at not only the trucks that come into fuel, but fire trucks being able to get around the site and having the appropriate turning radiuses for that. And we adjusted to make those so that we would have appropriate turn radius for that. This is not a truck stop where you have showers and all of that. There's no parking on site for any trucks to park or truckers to rest. This is just simply fuel for them, and they would just fuel and leave the site. Charging station is just one of those things where he had decided, that came up tonight. We really hadn't had discussions about that. Certainly one can be added, if need be, and if that's considered an important condition to be able to do that. But at this point, we didn't offer that because we had a lot of other things we were doing to enhance the environmental quality of the site and to add additional landscaping and those types of things that Adam went over in detail. Pedestrian traffic, we will have a crosswalk at Dogwood and Arundel that continues on that sidewalk that we're moving along Dogwood and Arundel. We will have crosswalks at Dogwood and Jones on both locations. There'll be a crosswalk that goes across Jones. There's ones at that location too that will go across Arundel. So those are already in the plan and will be provided. And I'm sure we're going to have to do appropriate traffic control devices, i.e. stop signs at that intersection. They will be required to meet DOT standards. We've gone through, in detail what we've done. You saw the conditions in terms of what was required under the traffic improvement analysis that was done in that study. We're, again, meeting those conditions and those requirements as required as part of that, including, like I said, the ramp coming off of 64. And I can speak personally because that's how I got to the meeting tonight. I was coming from on westbound 64 and came in, and I see the need. I mean, there was a lot of traffic backed up wanting to make a left turn, and we're adding that to help that traffic in making that left turn, although our folks will be going straight into our location to the straight and through. We'll use that, but at least it'll be delineated so those left turns clear that right and through right lane so they don't back that up. Chris, I can have you if you want to speak to any of the other issues and talk about, let me get him to speak a little more about the spandrel glass. I spoke in generalities. He can speak about some particulars and just some things about the site and what's been planned and how it's been planned.
I just need to kind of interject right here that this is the applicant speaking right now, and this is not part of the public comment that is open to residents.
Oh, did I step up at the wrong time? Or?
It's okay, it's okay.
We will get to anyone in the audience that wants to come up and do public comment.
Oh, I apologize for that, and we'll certainly come back up here and address any questions the public may have.
I'm mainly here. My name's Chris Taft, and my address is 525 Fallon Grove Way, Raleigh, North Carolina. So I'm here just to address the comment about the spaniel glass. I believe the requirement's 30%. We're showing 29. It really comes down to the width between the columns when you look at the storefront, and also the height of the glass too as well. So that's kind of why we landed at 29% versus 30%.
Commissioner Baxter?
I have an additional comment or question for the applicant. I'm not sure who can answer it, but it could be either of you. Could you please tell me if there is going to be 1, 2, or more than 2 emergency shut-off buttons or valves on site, and where those will be located?
It'll be the required number, but do you have the locations, please? I mean, Matt? No. We don't know those off the top of our head, but we will have whatever regulations require, and there's strict regulations regarding that. There'll be
There's just 2
emergency
separate
cutoffs.
fueling areas, and
There'll
I
be
believe...
separate cutoffs, I'm sure, for both areas.
Okay, thank you.
Because otherwise you can't get from the diesel area quick enough to get to the gasoline area or vice versa. So I'm sure there will be cutoffs at both. And then I didn't address earlier the height of the canopy. The canopy will need to be tall enough to account for those vehicles. Obviously, this building is not a tall building, so they'll have to be above the building for that reason. That is true. But again, because the ordinance, the gasoline pumps are behind the building, which is what the ordinance requires, and the others are on the side. But again, we're landscaping and providing those other items that we need to, but felt that it's always better to separate that traffic. And I'm happy to answer any of the questions you may have now. I think I touched almost everything. Again, I apologize for getting up when it was supposed to be public comment. Didn't mean to do that. But we'll be glad to come back up and answer any questions the public may have or anyone else at the appropriate time.
One quick question.
Yes.
I don't think it was stated, but it seems like it was assumed. I take it this is going to be a 24-hour operation.
Yes.
Has there been any thought about noise mitigation at all? Because there's a lot of noise from convenience stores and gas stations.
Nothing other than the fact that this is in a heavy commercial zone, and Adam pointed out it's all heavy commercial, so we're not adjoining residential as far as that being a problem, and that's on the town's future plan, had intended for that to be. As I said earlier, we could have done it without the extra pump on the side street just of right and not had to come forward with this rezoning, but we did it because it was better to do it that way to separate that diesel island from the rest of the fueling station. So we decided we would come forward with it. And part of that was additional things we were required to do that we wouldn't otherwise do. And we did agree to those and worked as Adam said, worked very closely with staff and was being responsive and agreeing to those conditions.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak in favor of the project?
Good evening, Mayor, all the members of the board. I'm Dallas Pierce Realty here in Zebulon. I reside at 434 Rogers Road, Zebulon. We've had this property marketed for several years. We've had a lot of people have made a lot of offers, made a lot of, give us a lot of letters of intent, things that just didn't work out. When these people came with 7-Eleven, we were very excited about it once we found out and looked at what they were trying to do. I do think that represents the highest and best use of that site. We're excited about it, especially since we've seen their site plan. These people are serious. They're putting a lot of money in it. Not only are they buying the site at full price, they are putting a tremendous amount of improvements that will serve this town and serve it well. I would like to see favoritism shown to them. I think they're good. I think they're good for this area. And I strongly support that that represents one of the highest and best use of that site that I've seen in the years that I've had it listed. I'd like to introduce you to one of the owners of the property, Mr. Carl Tart.
Excuse me. Thank you, Carl Tart, 7815 Roxborough Road, Bahama, North Carolina. I tell people it's spelled just like Bahama, but our water's not as pretty. But I have with me tonight, too. I inherited this land, my sister and I did, from our parents. My sister passed about a year ago. Her two children here, if they stand up, Rob Burlington and Jenna Fitch. We're in here in support of this project. I just want to say I moved to this town when I was in the 3rd grade. My dad moved us here because they had a band. And he wanted us to have the opportunity to have some things like that brought into our life that we wouldn't have where we're from a little town called Stovall, which certainly has not grown. It has diminished through the years. So I'm glad we made that move. But all to say that the businesses in this town, and I don't like to call it a town, they are a community. And because I tell you, whatever happened, everybody in a business downtown knew it. I got my hand spanked right over here several times by Miss Blackley for talking while she was trying to teach science. And before I could get downtown where I had a job, my boss knew about it. Of course, by the time I get home, my mother knew about it. But my point is it has always been a community that has been special to us and to the people who lived here. And I guess that's what has impressed me about this group. What little I have learned about them by talking with them and meeting with them, and by what Dallas has just said, their willingness to come forward and meet some of the things this community needs, they don't want to be part of the town, they want to be part of the community. And my family, Rob and Jenna, and I hear my wife also with me tonight, we see that this way and certainly hope you give it a positive. As Dallas said, we've had a lot of people in the past come and go. These have stuck with us, and they have stuck with us because they understand that community that I'm talking about. So again, we would like to ask you a positive consideration and to work with these people. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wishes to speak in favor? Hearing none. Is there anyone who wishes to speak in opposition? Hearing none. Is there anyone who wishes to speak neither for nor against, but just has something to say that they would like to say in this case? Hearing none. Anyone else wishes to speak before I close public hearing? Hearing none. I will close the public hearing and refer this matter in consideration to the planning board. Next, RV Parks, Michael Clark.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the board, members of the planning board. I'm a little excited. I have the shortest of the presentations tonight. It's kind of unusual for me. The second of the public hearings is 2024-01. This is a text amendment. This is a very...
Excuse me, Mike. I did not declare the public hearing for this.
Sorry.
Let me take care of that right quick. TA 2024-01 is a request for a text amendment, section 4.2.3, to allow for consideration of recreational vehicles as part of the planned development. I declare public hearing and ask for staff presentation.
All right.
Now.
Thank you, Mayor. As I was starting out, this is a text amendment that's actually applicant-driven, specifically by Jennifer Ashton, who is an attorney for Longleaf Partners. She's representing a company that's requesting to amend the table, the land use table in Chapter 2 to allow for RV parks to be considered as part of a planned development. The extent of the application is what is seen on the screen. It's adding an A for allowable under the planned development category. Currently, recreational vehicles are only permitted as special use permits within the residential multifamily zoning classification, the light industrial classification, as well as the heavy industrial classification. As you may recall, special use permits are a quasi-judicial process. So the response before the board is very binary in does it meet the standards or does it not meet the standards, and has the applicant met the burden of proof to show that it met those standards. By allowing it as part of a planned development, it allows for that negotiation process as part of a legislative orientation process, which would require recommendation from the planning board as well as ultimate decision before the Board of Commissioners. It opens it up to general comment as part of the public comment, as opposed to just requiring somebody with standing. Finally, as part of planned developments, it automatically requires the development to be better than what would otherwise be permitted under strict interpretation of our Unified Development Ordinance. This allows for mixed-use developments. It could be RV parks, cottages, short-term rentals, as well as campgrounds. But it's worth noting that the request before you tonight is not to approve an RV park, but only allow for an option as part of consideration as part of a planned development. The standards that you would apply for a text amendment can be found in section 2.2.20G. It notes, does it meet the public's health, safety, and welfare? Specifically, does it advance this, or does it create a negative context? Is it consistent with the town's adopted policy guidance? These would be your comprehensive land use plan, transportation plan, parks and recreation plan, 2030 strategic plan, as well as other elements of our Unified Development Ordinance. It's not in conflict with other regulations within our Unified Development Ordinance. That is response to changing conditions. As you're aware, the economy is constantly changing in terms of our needs. As we grow, the needs of this community change and adapt. Same thing as the needs of the area around us change. Our ordinances and regulations need to change and adapt to be reflective of that. Has this demonstrated a community need? Typically, this is something that would be situated with staff-led applications. In this context, we have an applicant that's looking to eventually come forward in the future. Therefore, that is demonstrating a community need. Is it not present in terms of a UDO? Is the use not listed or considered? While the use is considered in this context, it creates an additional possibility in terms of the regulatory tools that you can take into consideration. Is it consistent with the purpose and intent of our Unified Development? Once again, does it create situations that might be in conflict, not just in terms of text, but in terms of spirit and intent? Does it fit a logical and orderly development pattern? That's more oriented towards text or map amendments as opposed to text amendments. And then any other factors that the Board of Commissioners might deem relevant to the request. And finally, would approval of the text amendment result in adverse impacts? In this case, it allows for consideration. It doesn't allow for anything by right. It would still have to go through the legislative plan development process before it could be adopted. Staff does recommend accepting public comment of this matter. The applicant is present tonight, and I believe would be able to answer any questions that you may have of them. But once again, I'm available if you have any questions regarding this particular request.
Any questions from the Board of Commissioners? Commissioner Harrison?
No questions.
Commissioner Clark?
No questions.
Commissioner Miles?
None at this time.
Commissioner Baxter?
Yes. So as part of the UDO text amendment, I need to have an understanding of what exactly a recreational vehicle park is going to constitute. Does that mean that there is going to be, we are going to be allowing long-term RV type parks where people stay for 6, 8, 10, 12, 3.5 years? Or is this going to just simply say that any type of RV park is acceptable?
There are time restrictions that are listed in the standards section 4.3.5 LL that do eliminate the duration of stay. I don't recall if it's specifically 6 months or what that calculation is, but it is in months. More so, that is something that could be up for negotiation as part of the plan development process.
And that, of course, just so that the public knows, would mean that that would have to come back before us anytime the RV park is considering coming into town before it comes before us. So we would have to approve that and the conditions.
Approval of this is only allowing for that tool to be taken into consideration. Any approvals of the text amendment does not necessitate the approval of a park. It doesn't create precedence. It just allows for future consideration as part of a plan development, which would require public hearing, it would require planning board recommendation, and it would require a Board of Commissioner approval before they could move forward with construction drawings.
And right now, we have in that classification, we allow campgrounds,
That is correct.
but just not the RV park portion of it.
That is correct.
Any further questions from the Board of Commissioners? Planning Board. Ms. Alexander?
No. No questions.
Ms. Newkirk?
No questions.
Ms. Germano?
None at this time.
Mr. Lowry?
Nothing at this time, sir.
Ms. Johnson?
No questions.
Mrs. Shellington?
No questions.
Ms. Jenkins?
No questions.
Now we'll open this for public comment. Anyone that wishes to speak in favor, come to.
This,
The applicant has a few comments before it gets into the public.
I'm a tall one, so let me adjust the microphone. Thank you, Mayor, thank you, Commissioners, and thank you, Planning Board members, and thank you to staff as well. Staff has been great talking through this process with us and the best way to bring this proposal to you. My name is Jennifer Ashton. I'm an attorney with Longleaf Law Partners. My address is 4509 Creedmoor Road, Suite 302 in Raleigh, North Carolina. I'm here tonight on the behalf of the development team. Ryan Rimley and Roger Hahnbarrier, they are here with me as well, and you'll hear from Ryan in a little bit. They are looking to do an outdoor recreation resort, and Ryan and Roger both are great outdoorsmen. They love hiking and fishing and camping, and they do that with their families regularly, and they have a dream of opening a campground recreation resort for the people in this community and for the surrounding areas. They do live in North Raleigh, so they are not too far away from the town of Zebulon. We have spoken to staff a good bit about the best way to bring this type of use forward for you all that makes the most sense for the town of Zebulon. We do have some property in mind, but that is not for your consideration tonight. As Mr. Clark did state, we're not here on the rezoning portion yet. We're really just here to allow the RV park part of the use to be added into a planned development district. Anything after tonight, if that text amendment is ultimately approved, we will have to come back before all of you for an actual rezoning of the property to a planned development district. But one thing I do want to mention, Commissioner Baxter noted to this earlier, campgrounds are already allowed as a permitted use in a planned development district. However, the RV park amenity, the RV parking space amenity is not. So that's the piece that we are asking to have added. Again, the nice thing about a planned development district is we do have to come back in front of you for the rezoning, and at that time you all will see a master plan as to what we are specifically proposing for a particular property. And at that point in time as well, if you have any concerns or other things that you want to work with us on, you know, whether it be buffers or spacing or whatever may come up, we'll be able to address that a lot better with a planned development district. So some things I did want to note real quick, and then I'll turn it over to Ryan because I do want you to hear from him and his dream of opening this type of use in the town. I did mention that we do have to come back on a rezoning. Also, I do want to address a concern that I've heard from a few of the commissioners I've spoken with prior to this meeting about mobile home parks versus RV parks. I do want to make that distinction because your UDO does make that distinction as well. What we are proposing is not a mobile home park. A mobile home park is more of a permanent residential use, and that is not what we are looking to do. We are looking to do a vacation resort for people to come and relax and enjoy the outdoors, whether that be through camping or bringing their own RVs to the site and parking them for a temporary stay. We are happy to, as Mr. Clark mentioned, your UDO already does have length of stay requirements in them. I believe it's no more than 30 continuous days within a 6-month period. We may be asking for a little bit of flexibility there, but again, our proposal coming back to you, you all will get a chance to see it and you'll have an opportunity to talk with us about it. But there is no intention of turning this into a permanent residential mobile home park. I did want to mention too, the wonderful thing about this type of use, a campground with an RV parking space amenity, is there is a significant reduction in traffic with these types of uses compared to, you know, a single family neighborhood or even a shopping center. So when we do come back in with our master plan, you'll get a peek at what the traffic proposal is. And I will tell you, just based on this type of use versus a single family neighborhood use, and I know traffic is a big concern for the town, it's almost over a 50% reduction in traffic going to this type of use just because it's not a continuous use all year long. And then finally, I did want to point out that we do believe we're consistent with your comprehensive development plan. There are quite a few goals stated within that about promoting new people coming and visitors coming to the town of Zebulon and to the downtown areas. And we think providing an outdoor recreation resort of this type would be a great benefit and would further those goals. With that, now if I can, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to call Ryan Rimley up so he can tell you all a little bit about the development team and his dream for opening up this type of use. All right, thank you.
Everyone, my name is Brian Rimley. I live at 1412 Kennesaw Street, Wake Forest, North Carolina. So as Jennifer mentioned, I'm part of the application team for this proposal. I've grown up always loving the outdoors. Some of my fondest memories growing up are camping with my family. And I've always wanted to kind of do some sort of land development, and with my love for the outdoors and camping and kind of recent trends in the RV industry, this just seemed like a perfect fit. And so we've been looking for past 3 or 4 years for kind of the perfect piece of property, and we feel we found it for a piece of property off Shepherd School Road. It has a 6-acre pond and some nice topography. And we just feel it's the perfect kind of outdoor oasis provide an opportunity for families to spend time together and experiencing the outdoors, and just being kind of within, stone's throw of, downtown Zebulon. There's, it basically gives our guests the outdoor feel, but with the kind of convenience of being around town. So I just ask that you consider our proposal. Thanks.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, Dallas Pierce has been helping us try to find this perfect property that Ryan just alluded to, and I know he had a few words that he wanted to share with you as well.
Is this part of the public comment?
This is part of the applicant presentation.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Again, good evening, boards, Mayor. Dallas Pierce Realty. We've marketed this property as we do most all properties, and we shopped it around. Primarily, we thought, sure, it's so pretty that with all the ponds and the rolling hills, and it was just going to be the perfect site for some developer just to go nuts and want to develop it. Was not the case. Every developer looked at it, it was just, they were not interested. And the reason they were not interested, it had a large amount of rock. And if you know anything about grading and construction, rock is not good for anybody. It tears equipment up, it's hard to get out of the ground, it ruins the return of their investment of trying to deal with those normal returns. Also, it had the ponds, 2 large ponds, which is another thorn in the side of the developer. What do you do with the pond? Do you drain it? Can you use it for retention? One of them. But they both are large ponds, especially one of them, several acres. Then, to make it a little more complicated, Zebulon has a sewer line easement that goes almost right down through the middle of it. So that took away from some of the so-called excitement of developer as well, wanting to go and deal with putting $500,000, $750,000 homes out there. So then we searched and searched and scratched my head and trying to figure out what in the world to do with this property. What am I going to do with this property? It's so pretty. It's a beautiful piece of property. But what is the best use for it? Then one day my phone rang, and it was Roger on the phone, and I didn't know Roger. He said, we do this RV park campground, upscale version, really nice. I said, really? He started explaining to me all about the yurts and the super duper tents. It's called a yurt. I never heard of such thing. He started explaining to me about there was like in-ground pools, big clubhouse, kayaking and walking and jogging trails, fishing. And I said, wow, that sounds pretty nice. And he said, yeah, me and my son-in-law, Ryan, are trying to find such a site. That's what we want to do. And the light came on. And I said, boy, do I have the right site for you. So he came by my office, and I took him out there, and we wrote it, and he said, this is the right site. It was perfect. It was all the rolling hills, the ponds added value, the rolling hills, the rocks did not hurt the type of development that he was talking about. He was talking about not having to put in water and sewer all over the place and have 100 houses out there, or whatever it may be. So I realized that, in time we have searched and searched that this is probably beyond a doubt the highest and best use for this property. And I really searched that use of all properties that I have listed. I've been doing this for 49 years. And, I put a lot of emphasis and a lot of care about searching for what's good for this town. I don't bring you anything to this board that I'm not convinced and I'm not sold on is good for all of you and all of your families. And this one's good for you, or I wouldn't be standing up here testifying to that effect. It, as you well know, we have no hotel in Zebulon. We have no motels in Zebulon. We have nowhere for people to stay that come and visit your family. And your family, like my family, if your children come see you, for some reason they don't want to stay in the same house with me.
True.
And you know, I'm kind of glad they don't, to be honest with you. But yet I love them. I want to be with them. I want to be around those grandchildren. But sometimes it gets a little complicated with that much drama under one roof. It would be awful nice to have a place for people to come that want to visit you, that could park their RV, entertain the children, entertain themselves for 3 or 4 days or a week or two while they visit with you. They shove on off going wherever they go. Wouldn't that be nice? Everybody's happy. How about the Mudcats? Where do they stay? Ball players, when they have games in town, where do they stay? Where do fans stay? Where do people want to come to ball games from out of town? There's nowhere to stay here. This use is a positive use. It's a property that truly fits the needs of this town and the highest and best use of that property. There's no doubt about it. I've searched it out. It is economically feasible, and with a text adjustment, it will meet the zoning requirements, and it is a good, safe project for this town. I encourage you as a board to consider this as a positive thing. I would ask you to consider this and to look at it favorably. These people have spent a lot of money already on engineering, on environmental concerns, and it's just getting started. The longer this thing goes on, they will spend much, much more. And they don't mind doing that. But I think they deserve to have something up front that they know that at least that looks promising, that they're going in the right direction before they spend a large more amounts of money. And I hope this board will expedite this, make them feel welcome and at home, and give the town of Zebulon something a little different. That's good. I like this project, and I want to see it here. The town of Zebulon needs it. We need it, and I think it would set us apart and be a very creative thing for this town to do. Thank you.
And thank you, everyone, for listening, and we're here to answer any questions that anybody has. And as I said, if we are approved on this part of it, this is the baby step, the first step, and we would be back on a rezoning later. But we're happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from the board for the applicant? Commissioner Baxter?
No.
Commissioner Miles?
None at this time, sir.
Commissioner Clark?
None.
Commissioner Harrison?
None.
Anyone from the planning board that would have questions for the applicant at this time? Commissioner Alexander?
No questions.
No?
Nope.
Mr. Lowry? Mr. Johnson?
No.
Mrs. Schilling?
No questions.
Ms. Jenkins?
No questions.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Now for public comment. Anyone wishing to speak in favor of the project, come to the podium. Your name and address.
Can I ask one or make one clarification?
Go right ahead.
We are not considering whether or not to approve or to recommend approval of this project. All we're doing is talking about making a text amendment change. Which will
Correct.
then likely lead to that discussion in the future.
Correct.
Okay, just want to make sure. It sounded like we were kind of approving the project at some point. Speak in favor.
We have someone speaking in favor of the project?
Yes, my name is Kyla Burden. My heartbeat's beating so fast. I just want to say I think that it would be great for the town of Zebulon.
Could
As a
we have
family
your,
person-
could we have your address, please?
Yeah, I forgot that. It's Kyla Burden. It's 909 Loose Strife Court in Zebulon.
Thank you.
So as a resident of Zebulon, one of the things that when we actually looked to move from up north, we were looking for more like country because we do like camping. And I will say that having like a campground here would actually be like really huge because as a family, like we truly enjoy like hiking, we enjoy like riding bikes and things like that. So I definitely think that this is like a great thing for the town because we want to have like that family atmosphere for people and family that are moving to this area. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else wish to speak in favor? Hearing none. Anyone wishing to speak in opposition? Hearing none. Anyone wishes to speak neither for or against, but just has something they want to say? Hearing none. There's no one else to speak. Now we'll close the public hearing and refer the matter to the planning board for their consideration. Thank you. Next, text amendment TA 2024-20 is a request for a text amendment to section 4.2.3 to allow the consideration of new use child care drop-in. I declare the public hearing open and ask for staff presentation.
Mayor, Commissioners, and Planning Board. I'm here today to talk about adding a use to our use table of drop-in daycares. So staff is bringing forward the recommendation of establishing drop-in daycares as a new use type to be added to the town of Zebulon UDO. The reason that we're bringing this in front of you guys today is that we've had numerous people reach out to us with an interest in providing this use type, and we just don't have it on our current use table, and so we need to add it as a use so that those people can come and apply to have that use in our town. So you may be thinking, we already have child care centers. What's the difference? So I'm going to go over those differences right now. So a child daycare center, which we currently have on our use table, is a child care center where parents will bring their children on a regular basis. They will watch their children for longer periods of time, over 4 hours. For parents who will not be remaining local to the facility, so they may go to work, they may have larger errands to run, and as well there is an outdoor space requirement for the child care centers. So the drop-in daycares are on a more irregular basis to watch children for a shorter period of time and is really intended for when parents are running local errands, such as going to the store, going shopping for a couple hours at a time. And there's no outdoor space requirement, so they would only be required to have indoor child care facilities, though that does not disclude them from having outdoor spaces. It's not a requirement. So this is what the change will actually look like to our UDO. So it will be added to our use table, and it will be permitted within the commercial districts and mixed-use districts where the current child care centers are permitted. It will not be permitted in any of the residential districts, as this use type is really intended to be in those centers of commerce where people will be able to drop off temporarily, go run errands, and come pick their children back up. As well, we will be adding the definition that was provided to you guys in your packets to our Chapter 9 definitions. So when considering this text amendment, you're going to consider the same standards that you consider for all other text amendments, but I'm going to go through a couple of them, just talking about how they might apply to this specific text amendment. So number one, public health, safety, and welfare. So by allowing this use type and adding it to our use table, we're able to regulate it, and we're able to make sure that they're going to be safe and taking care of the children who come to the facility and make sure that it falls into our allowable uses. As well, I want to point out number three, that it is not in conflict. So making sure that they are not allowed in residential zoning districts where it just wouldn't make sense to have, especially for that short-term drop-off for a short period of time. And then, as I mentioned previously, we've had a number of people come reach out to us about adding this use type or wanting to have this use in our town. And so that hits number 5, which demonstrates community need. As well, there's a couple of extra standards that I'm just going to leave up here for you guys to look over. So, for instance, matters not presented in UDO adoption, consistent with the purpose and intent, logical and orderly development patterns, other factors, and no adverse impact. So we don't see this text amendment being in conflict with any of those. So staff recommends accepting public comment and referring the matters to the planning board for recommendation. And I will now be here to answer any of your questions.
Any questions from the Board of Commissioners? Commissioner Baxter?
Did you structure this verbiage on another community, or did you pull this from some other municipality?
Yeah, so this is actually the definition that you guys have in your packet. I didn't put it up on the screen because it was just a big block of words, but it is a modification from the state standards for this use type. And as well, I'll let you know that the state does regulate this use type like it does for other childcare facilities. So any childcare facilities would have to apply through us to meet our zoning, and then would also have to apply through the state to make sure that they're regulated up to state standard for this use type as well.
There's, as part of the verbiage, it says, where guardians participate in activities that are not employment related. And so I'm assuming that then, you know, like, how do we make sure that that is enforced, as well as that to make sure that they are not running errands outside of 15 minutes? I mean, those two things seem very strange to have as part of the requirement.
That's definitely hard to enforce, and I understand that. As far as like what we're looking for is that zoning aspect, and so we're looking for, this is a different use type than long-term childcare facilities, which does facilitate that longer-term distance. And so the state regulation actually has a specific use type, which we are following their definition to create that use type, which would be the short term, which is what we're putting before you today. So they would have standards as far as that. And you're right. I mean, we can't necessarily guarantee that someone won't go over 15 minutes away, but this use type is really intended for that short-term use. So there would be, I'm sure there would be rules in place at these individual facilities about how long they're able to keep the children in their care, and I'm sure that's also something that the state looks at when they come in with an application to the state as well.
And so does this mean that organizations such as churches that traditionally have, like, drop off your kid for date night as part of like some kind of fundraising initiative, this is going to, I guess, now make this a legal activity?
So that short term, in the sense of like through another community, is like through a church or through like if they have like a, I don't know, like if the community center did a drop off or whatever, like that's kind of a separate use type. And so we don't necessarily have a use for that. It'd be more of a temporary case by case thing. But we don't do anything in regards to that now. But this would be more for if someone wanted to set up a specific business to do temporary drop off daycare. So this would be like, a facility that might have a couple of play structures or a couple of toys, and then staff there to watch the children while their mom or dad runs a couple of errands. So that's the intent of this. So it wouldn't impact like community events that churches or schools or any other organization would be doing to this effect.
Thanks.
Any other questions from the board? Commissioner Miles?
None this time, sir.
Commissioner Clark?
None.
Commissioner Harrison? Questions from the planning board? Ms. Alexander?
None.
Ms. Newkirk?
Yes, I have a question. In addition to the 4 hours, has it been considered, when you mentioned date night, so has it been considered to have like a weekend overnight, or is this just 4 hours?
So this is just temporary childcare. So unlike a childcare center, which would have longer term childcare, I don't know if any of those do overnights, but this would not be considering overnight. This would be short term. Like you could do like a date night, go out for like 2 hours, come back, pick up your kid. It just depends on the facility, what they're doing, but there wouldn't be any overnight supervision.
Thank you.
Mr. Germano?
Just to clarify for you as well, that would be a completely separate requirement from DHHS, so that would be a different planning altogether. But other than that, no questions.
Mr. Lowry?
Nothing at this time.
Ms. Johnson?
I didn't see anything about age of the child.
Yeah, so the state standard, which it is in the definition, and I probably should have added that in the slides just so for reference, but the definition has it for any children 13 and under. That's the age threshold that the state sets for these childcare facilities.
Okay. And is there a limit? I know you said less than.
So I believe that, I don't know what the limit is as far as the state regulations. I'm sure it's based off of space and number of staff and all of that. But I think the threshold to like when they start counting it as a childcare facility, I believe it might be 5, but that's also in the definition as well. I just can't remember it off the top of my head right now. 3. Thank you.
Mr. Schilling?
No.
Just, I think you stated that a number of people have come forward wanting to provide this service. Just curious, have we had any people requesting the service?
So we haven't directly had people requesting, but hearing people who want to bring it to the town, I'm sure heard a need, or at least maybe they had a need and they wanted to provide that service to other people in town. But we haven't necessarily heard directly people requesting, and we don't often. Often we just hear people who want to bring something to the town, less than requesting. But yeah, that they probably saw a need, and that's why they brought it to our attention.
No other questions.
Ms. Jenkins?
No questions.
Mayor?
Commissioner Baxter?
When you look on page 32, the attachment 1 for Article 9, it doesn't specifically list 4 hours as the maximum. Can that be incorporated into the text amendment?
Yeah, we can work on incorporating that. I think the state standard had the 4 hours, but we probably took it out when we put it in our own. So we can add that if that's something that the Board of Commissioners and the Planning Board would want to be added.
Well, unless the planning board thinks that it needs to be a different time, I'd be willing to absolutely entertain their thoughts about that, but I'd like to actually see it, no matter how it's presented to us, for final review in the actual article.
Mr. Lowry?
And that definition also talks about the within 15 minutes. That would be for the parent or the guardian to be running errands, so within like a 15-minute radius. You know, I understand that we're growing at this point in time pretty rapidly. But there are still limitations on date night in the town of Zebulon. So the only other areas would be like Nightdale or Wendell, and that's stretching it. So is there a reason that was put in there? I know parents, they drop off their kids, they're not gonna,
Yeah.
I'm only going 15 minutes away. They're gonna go to, Raleigh. So I'm saying why have that as part of that definition? I'm sorry.
Yeah, so that 15-minute limit or 15-minute range is really just to continue to promote that short term. So you're not dropping your kid off and then going far away and then having trouble getting back, or if your kid needs something and you're not close by. It really is meant for that temporary, because it's not like a traditional childcare facility where you have a rapport with the people who work there. It's more of that temporary, I have some, there's people watching my kids temporarily. I'm going to be right around the corner. If they have a medical emergency or another emergency, I'm going to be close by. So that's the intent of that. And of course, as we discussed earlier, it is harder to enforce that, but that's the reasoning behind the intent of that.
Schilling?
I'm sorry if I missed this earlier. So in looking at the definition again, it says at least 3 or more. Was there an upper limit on the maximum number of children?
The number of children, there is not a maximum that we're listing, but with the state regulation, there's certain, ratios of children to caregivers, and there's certain, like, if you have this much square footage, you can only have this many kids. So that would be the limit. Yeah.
Questions from the planning board? Do we have an applicant presentation?
There's no applicant for that. The town of Zebulon is the applicant. So the next action would be public comment.
Any other questions from either board? Now we will take public comment. Anyone wishes to speak in favor, come to the podium on the left. Hearing none. Anyone wishes to speak in opposition, come to the podium on the left. Anyone wish to speak neither for or against? We just want to have something to say. If there is none who wish to speak, I will close the public hearing and refer the matter to the planning board for consideration. Thank you. And I think this is a good time for a 10-minute break.
He heard me.
I heard you loud. reconvene. Next on the agenda is construction development signs. Text Amendment 2024-23 is a request for text amendment, Section 5.11, to allow for consideration of new sign type construction signs. I declare the public hearing open and ask for staff presentation.
Thank you, Mayor York. So staff is bringing forward the recommendation of establishing construction/development signs as a new sign type. So this would be mostly an amendment to Chapter 5.11.6 of the Town of Zebulon UDO, which would add a new sign type to our sign section. So construction/development signs are defined as a temporary sign located on a lot for the duration of its construction/development. So our UDO does not currently have a sign type that would allow for the advertisement of new development. We've had to deal with these signs on a case-by-case basis, and in some cases, it's become a code enforcement issue. The establishment of this new sign type will allow us to set standards and regulate these signs to help maintain a consistent character within the town of Zebulon. So we've made a couple changes we've added a new sign section, and so this comes with adding new standards. So I'm going to talk through the dimensional standards real quick. So the maximum height for these signs will be 8 feet. The maximum sign face will be 32 square feet. And so the minimum setback from the lot line will be 10 feet. So as well, they are limited to having one sign per frontage on a right-of-way access, and so this means access from a road. So that will limit the number of signs that they can have on site. As well, we've added an additional durational standards, and so this is where it really varies from supplemental signs, which is how we've been characterizing these signs in the past. So this calls for these sign types to be temporary. So they will be re-reviewed in a residential district every 2 years, and within a non-residential and mixed-use district every 1 year. So that just makes sure that the signs don't become dilapidated, and they also are staying current with what development is coming in. As well, we are going to require that the removal of these construction/development advertising signs have to be removed once the development is determined to be complete. So in the case of commercial development, this is often when they're issued a CO, and then within a residential development, this usually constitutes when they issue the last CO on the last house. But we do recognize that sometimes it takes years for that to happen within a residential development. So this wording of how we worded this removal kind of gives us some leeway to say it appears that your development is complete for the time being. May you remove your sign now. So that's kind of why we phrased it in an ambiguous way. And as well, once the maximum duration happens, it'll be up for a re-review. So it won't mean that they necessarily have to remove the sign, but it means that we're reviewing it to make sure that it's still up to our current standards, as well as it's not worn down or dilapidated. So we have a couple additional standards, and these are just to make sure that we're having the best possible development signs that we can. So the support braces shall be hidden from public view. So this means that you won't just see these really tall structures that have really long support braces, and that's all you see. It's just the wooden posts. This is really supposed to help kind of screen that. Construction/development advertising signs shall not be located within a street right-of-way. So this just means that it has to be on the property. So it can't be off-site, it can't be within the street, it can't cause a safety issue. That's the main concern with that one. Construction, development, advertising signs shall not be placed within the required site distance triangles. Again, that has to do with making sure that we're promoting health and safety, and it's not going to be in anybody's sight line when they're trying to make a turn. Construction, development, advertising signs shall not include permanent modifications to site or building. So this speaks to the temporary nature of these signs. So they shouldn't be permanently modifying the site. They shouldn't have a big stone base. They should really be temporary. The construction and development advertising signs may not be illuminated. As well, this is to help with if it's in a residential zone, we don't want lights shining into people's homes. And as well, we just want to maintain that temporary nature, and so that's also helping to maintain that. Construction and development advertising signs shall not block windows or doors. So we want to make sure that there's access, there's visibility, so that's just another standard. And then construction and development advertising signs must be maintained in good condition. So again, this speaks to making sure that it's not dilapidated, and that's on all of our sign types. But especially with these, with the temporary nature and the material that they're often built out of, we just want to make sure that they are not going to degrade the character of the area. So again, public health, safety, and welfare, the different standards that you have to follow when considering this text amendment. So public health, safety, and welfare, the town's adopted policy guidance, not in conflict, changed conditions, and demonstrating community need. So as we said, we've had a number of these signs pop up in our community already, and we've had to classify them as supplemental signs. So this is a change in our community's need. We now need a sign type that will help to regulate the duration of these signs, as well as make sure that they maintain a good condition and are within height regulations. As well, a couple more standards. This matter that is not present in the UDO adoption, consistent with the purpose and intent of the UDO, logical and orderly development patterns, other factors, and no adverse impact. Again, we don't see any of these conditions being a problem in the case of this text amendment. So staff recommends accepting public comment and referring the matter to the planning board for recommendation. I will now take any questions that you guys have.
Any questions from the board, commissioners? Commissioner Baxter?
So, because you can ask that signs be up to our current standards, does that mean that the signs won't ever be considered grandfathered?
So, yes and no. So the current signs that are up would be grandfathered because they came in pre-UDO. And that's just how state statute works in regards to our UDO.
That wasn't quite my question, but
yeah.
you can finish what you were saying.
Yeah, and then, so as far as these signs, yeah, so they would be grandfathered in if the regulations were to change, but when they come up to that review period, they would have to follow the new standards.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what will happen if a project stalls?
Yeah, that's a good question. So that's another reason why we want to hold the re-reviews, because then we can really take a look at, okay, so, you know, you have this business coming, but you haven't done any work on your building in like a year, right? And so that really gives us the opportunity to reevaluate and kind of check in with the project and say, what's going on with this? How can we make sure that we're advertising for the right time frame and that we're making sure that your sign isn't up for years on end when the project isn't going anywhere? So that's something that we're considering with that duration, and we're able to reevaluate at the time of that reevaluation period, so the 1 year period and the 2 year period.
So just help me understand, because under number 3, which says the durational standards, you'll be asking for removal if once the development is determined to be complete, but you'll be able to also say, listen, your project has stalled, the sign is up for review, and we're just not going to let you put the sign back up? I mean, from how I would see that as a developer, I would say, but yeah, my project's not complete yet. I still have 87 lots that need to happen, but they might not happen for like 17 years.
Yeah, and that's a conversation that we can have with the developer at the time that they're bringing us the sign permit, because we do really want to make sure that the signs that are going up in town are reflective of the development that is currently happening, and making sure that we're advertising businesses that are coming into town and homes that will be available to residents, and not something that's long off in the future. So that's something that we would evaluate at the time. I don't know right off the top of my head the legal side of that, so we'd have to discuss that. But as far as the intent of that, the intent is to to have that duration for that reevaluation period.
Would the verbiage need to be changed in any way to make it a little bit more legal so that if we do run into a situation like that, we can still have some enforcement capability and be able to ask for someone to remove a sign that is, for something that's clearly not moving forward?
Yeah, that's a terrific question. The way that's written right now is unless the town grants authority to continue to keep the sign up after the 1 year, our current regulations say it must come down. If the project is stalled and there's no indication of it starting back up within a very short time period, then the sign will come down until the applicant shows and demonstrates that they'll be moving forward with the project, in which case they have the capability to apply to reinstall the sign at that time.
Thank you so much for the clarification.
Thank you for your questions.
Any other questions from the Board of Commissioners? Commissioner Miles?
None at this time, sir.
Commissioner Clark?
None.
Commissioner Harrison?
No.
Any questions from the Planning Board? Ms. Alexander? Ms. Newkirk? Ms. Germano?
Has any consideration been had for the various types of signs that would be considered screening? So on chain link fence or within windows of existing buildings, things like that. This seems very much a site-specific sign rather than.
Yeah, so this is very site-specific. We have other sign types, and I do get what you're saying with, there are other types of construction. There's construction that might happen in a singular building. There's some that might have fencing all the way around. We did not formulate this text amendment for that. It's more for those standalone signs, which you've been seeing pop up a lot in town. But as far as like that fence wrapping and like any window signs, we do have like window sign requirements that would fall into, that would also regulate those construction signs within windows. But as far as fence wrapping, we don't have that at this time.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I would use, what was it, 113 East Vance, or no, 114 East Vance, the old Carter's Bakery building. Has had a sign in it for a long time, and then I foresee where 120 North Arundel is also going to be a sign for a while. So as those situations pop up, I think they could also be held to these same
Standards.
renewals or processes for those as well.
Yeah, we definitely didn't create measurement standards for those, but we can definitely look into adding that and also holding them to similar durational standards as well as maintenance standards as well.
That's all for now.
Mr. Lowry?
Just a couple of questions. One, I wanted to piggyback on the chain link fence. I think I would like to see something added to this regarding that for construction. When we get into commercial buildings or structures being built, a lot of times they're putting those temporary fences up, and this sign requirement standard does not hold them to anything as far as plastering something all along, Arundel Avenue with this temporary fence, you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
It seems like it's more laid out as if this were perpendicular to a road as far as like a home development or something along those lines. Who does the review after the 1 or 2 year?
Yeah, so the way that review process would happen is that we would keep track and actually put on the original permit that is issued the date of re-review. So it would just be 2 or 1 years, 1 year or 2 years from the period that the permit was originally issued, and we'd keep track of that internally as well. And then whoever's our planner one, that's who normally does our sign permit reviews, so they would be responsible for the re-review. And either them or our code enforcement team would work together to reach out to the parties involved to make sure that they're getting those applications in.
That's what I was wondering, if it was planning department or code review or a combination of the both, so I appreciate the
Yeah.
clarification. Is there anything in here that requires them to have a sign for these developments?
So we don't currently require it. I think there's some intent with that, depending on the size of the site. You don't want a massive sign that's taking up most of the site. But yeah, so we don't currently require it, and the intent of this is not to require it, but to just provide guidance for if developers do want to provide those signs, what those would look like and how we would regulate them.
I think I would personally like to see a requirement for these developments. I think it's in the public interest to know what's coming and what they can expect. I think it would help address a lot of questions that come up and rumors that spread through the community regarding developments. So I think I would like to see a requirement making them put this type of sign up.
Thank you for the input.
Piggybacking off of that, would it be possible to require some kind of fencing with screening for developments that are along major thoroughfares and sidewalks? So, for example, I think about the townhome development along Arundel that's up against a sidewalk. I could see potentially having some kind of safety issue with not having some kind of barricades there. And as we start to get more infill projects, I see more projects like that happening. But just having a chain link fence isn't all that attractive. So how do we get them to promote what's going to happen there?
Yeah, so that'd be a little bit of a different section than signage. To talk about that, it'd probably be more in screening or fencing. But we can definitely explore that as a future text amendment.
Can I please just make everyone aware that the feed is down and people are not currently able to access the feed? Do we need to ask about how that's working?
We're working on that.
All right.
Yep, Gary's working on it.
All right, thank you.
Hi, y'all. We apologize for the brief cut in feed. The feed is back live, and the unique link for YouTube is on the Town of Zebulon Facebook page. If anybody needs to repost it or re-upload it, you can find it there. It should be continuation, as well as Gary will post the full uninterrupted clip to our YouTube tomorrow.
Thank you.
Appreciate y'all.
Thank you, Taylor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else from the planning board? Ms. Johnson?
No, no questions.
Mr. Schilling?
Just one, I would echo the comments from David and from Michael about wraps on fences. Just want to clarify, several areas say minimum setback from the lot line 10 feet, but in the dimensional standards, it says minimum setback 5 feet. So is it, just want to clarify, is it 5 feet or 10 feet?
We will take a look at that and make sure that we're getting that consistent next time it comes before the board. If you guys have a preference of which one you would like, we can add that in, but that was just a error.
Higgins?
No questions.
Any other questions, comments from the planning board? We'll now take public comment. Anyone wishes to speak in favor? To the podium. Hearing none. Anyone who wishes to speak in opposition, come to the podium. Hearing none. Anyone wishes to speak neither nor for or against? And I guess for a point of reference, we didn't have anyone, did we have anyone to send anything in for submit for any of these public hearings?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you. Hearing none. If there is no one else who wishes to speak, I will close the public hearing and refer this matter to the planning board for consideration. Thank you. Construction drawings, text amendment 2024-204 UDO. There's a request, a text amendment, Article 2 of the UDO to revise and clarify site plan and consider construction drawing developments review procedures. I declare the public hearing open and ask for staff presentation.
So this is a amendment that's being proposed as kind of a change to the process, and it's a clarification for a lot of the developments that are going on. We have a lot of people in the development field that see how our process goes through. We have members that are members of our TRC that are involved in other municipalities, whether that be part of the City of Raleigh Public Utility Department, our engineers that are consulting for us, or even stormwater. And part of the issue that occurs when we are going through the review process, specifically on stuff that is going through conditional rezoning, plan developments, or special use permits, is currently there's not a definition or separation between what is the site plan that you all see and what is the site plan that has the final construction documents. A lot of times you can see in the image above, it's just site plan, and we kind of work through with the developer about what they're seeing, whether that is what you all are seeing, whether that is the specific landscape standards, parking standards, things like that. The zoning issues, we make sure to include those on that first site plan. And then the second site plan, after they've gone through board approval, turns into kind of a construction document where they have the full utility details, where they go from a 2D to a 3D design, where they're worried about the slope and pitch of the sewer. That kind of stuff that doesn't need to get mixed into the board's approval and turn your packets in 3 and 4 times the size just because of the level of design that those incur. So this amendment is looking at changing from just a site plan and that standard term to match what other area municipalities use and modifying into 3 definitions. One of those being the residential preliminary plan, and then the other preliminary version is the non-residential site plan. So those are the 2. Obviously, residential preliminary is dealing with your strict residential subdivisions, and your non-residential site plan is your commercial, mixed use, things like that. And it is clarifying the process and what is required for those preliminary drawings. And then moving forward, they kind of come back together with a definition for construction drawings. And again, that is in line with what other municipalities deal with, what our TRC team that works with other municipalities, the language they're seeing every day. Because more often than not, when something gets submitted, we get calls from City of Raleigh, for example, that goes, what level of review am I doing on this? Am I dealing with construction drawings, or is this something that's going to the board and we'll deal with the construction drawings later? So this is clarifying, easing, and making a more understandable process for both the TRC, the staff, as well as developers. So dealing with this, staff recommends approval. I'd be happy to answer specific questions about this, but this is just kind of a clarification and changing to the wording and breaking out into more specific preliminary drawings and then specific construction drawings.
Questions from the Board of Commissioners?
So is this,
Commissioner Baxter?
thank you. Is this not a part of the public hearing then?
It is part of the public.
But you're making a recommendation?
Sorry, I pulled the wrong one on there. That is my apologies. I pulled the wrong slide to that.
Please tell me the nuts and bolts of this? Because what it seems like to me is that you are just taking the old process, which is site plan, board approval, and then the next site plan, and you're breaking it into residential and non-residential.
Yeah. So we have specific process that's spelled out in the ordinance that for site plans and how they run through, and it is a combination of a few things that we intend to address in dealing with this amendment. Yes, one, it is splitting and clarifying the residential and non-residential, but part of that goes into the level of review that different groups are doing. When we're talking about residential, we are talking about a whole plethora of additional review items that are involved, whether that is the transportation improvements with just the roads going through, and it's the details and specifics of that are going to be clarified, what is expected at each process as a checklist with an update to our applications when we go through that as staff. So this is establishing, this is a specific residential, and then we will go through the final details, the nuts and bolts, the nitty-gritty of what each one is required with the update to that application.
When you have construction drawing approval listed, we are used to seeing when an applicant comes before the board asking for a development, a planned development, or whatever it might be. We're used to being able to see some of those construction drawings or housing types, let's say. And from what it seems like, from what I see in front of me, that is not going to be the case if this amendment is made to the UDO. Could you help me understand that?
What you're seeing does not change. What you're seeing in what previous subdivisions or rezonings doesn't change what you'd be seeing in the future. This is a clarification on that 2D versus 3D. When we talk construction documents, we talk about more than just that overhead view of the lot that might show, you do see water lines, where sewer lines are going, but the details of how those are constructed, the slopes of it, the slopes of the streets, and a lot of that engineering level detail is not included on the drawings that you see right now. So you might see water line, but the details of its size, its flow, things like that aren't part of that. And so it's just clarifying that specification. But again, what you guys see, what planning board sees is not changing. That site plan, that preliminary drawing is the same.
And we're still going to see TIAs and
yes, that's a whole separate part of the ordinance, so all those things continue to move forward that they would be following.
okay.
Any other questions from the board? Commissioner Miles?
None at this time, sir.
Commissioner Clark?
None at this time.
Commissioner Harrison?
No, sir. Thank you.
Any questions, comments from the planning board? Ms. Alexander?
No.
Ms. Newkirk?
No questions.
Ms. Germano?
No questions, just a general comment. I appreciate the effort that you guys put into this. This is definitely something that is needed. And with people that I've spoken with and dealt with, this will definitely clarify some confusion that they are having with what the town is asking of them before the boards. So this is good. Thank you.
Mr. Lowry?
Just a clarification, so the numbering in the table, just the section reference.
Yeah.
Kind of.
That is off right now just because as I made a single change or tried to add stuff, it threw off all those numbers. Those tables are automatically generated. And so those numberings will be addressed when we enter it into the final document. And so it'll be clear.
Ms. Johnson?
No questions.
Ms. Shelley?
No question.
Ms. Jenkins?
No question.
We will now take public comment. Anyone wishes to speak in favor, come to the podium. Hearing none. Anyone wishes to speak in opposition, come to the podium. Hearing none. Anyone wishes to speak neither for or against, but just want to have something to say, come to the podium. Hearing none. There is no one else who wishes to speak. Any submitted comments?
No, sir.
No submitted comments? Is there anyone wishes to speak? No one else wishes to speak. I will close the public hearing and refer the matter to the planning board for consideration. There's nothing else. There a motion to adjourn?
So moved. So moved.
Thank you, Commissioner Miles.
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Harrison. All in favor? Meeting adjourned.